So I now have a Apache server, a PHP server, and a SQL server, and basically one software installed on my machine. And you've seen an example of what you can do with PHP testing on a local server. The next step then would be how to connect to a database, which is usually, in my opinion, sort of the most difficult step if you're not used to the procedure. Dreamweaver actually helps quite a bit in this. And when we get into WordPress, we're actually going to have to do all this manually, but we're going to be using the same software called PHPMyAdmin, which is a great way to control your databases, to sort of parse through your databases. And if you actually had database skill, you could actually build and maintain and edit your databases through PHPMyAdmin. Well, since I have a local server and PHP server on my computer now, I can actually do it on a local version just to get a sense of how it works. So I've rebooted, and the WAMP is not working, so I have to turn it back on. I do notice that over here the icon is not there. So in case you don't see it over in your quick launch toolbar, you can go over to your start menu and you'll see, since I've already done it, it is a program. So basically you go into the program area to start it. So I'm going to start WAMP server. Click that. Now in the meantime, I click yes. In the meantime, I'm going to look on the website, and under, let's see, where do I have it? Assets here. I have a link, it's the third one down under assets, called Example SQL. So I'm going to click that, and this is Firefox. So, oh, Firefox works in Windows, isn't that nice? I'm going to save the file, and I'm going to go ahead and, well, as soon as it downloads, I'm going to right click and I'm going to open containing folder. I don't need Firefox anymore, so I'm going to collapse that. And the containing folder is, there's my SQL file. I'm just going to drag that onto the desktop here so you can see this. Where did it go? Okay, so I zip this from the website, and this is the file right here. It looks like you can't open it with a application. I believe you can open this with Notepad. So if I said, oh, where do I open with? No, it doesn't really say, does it? Oh, okay. Well, it is Notepad that opens this. Looks pretty scary. Lots of stuff. This is a database in its raw form, and basically this is what a SQL file looks like. It's not extremely easy to work with in this form, but what I am going to do is I'm going to import it into PHPMyAdmin, and it's going to turn into a workable database. So this is a .sql file right here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use PHPMyAdmin to then integrate it into my website, which in this case is on my local server. So if you recall, I created a testing server inside my Dreamweaver environment using the Dreamweaver file manager here. Here's the testing server, here's the local files, and consequently, if you recall, these are both the same folder. Okay, so back in Dreamweaver, I'm just going to collapse this again. Back in Dreamweaver, I'm going to go ahead and open up a test page. It doesn't really matter. I'm just going to open up a page here. And let's see if I have my servers on. Yes, it's showing green. So just to make sure things are working, I'm going to preview in Firefox. And yep, it's all working. That's always my test. Okay, now to get to phpMyAdmin, on Windows at least, if you click the WAMP server icon, you'll actually see a quick link. It's actually easier in Windows than it is in Mac. You click the quick link, and what you're going to see is the phpMyAdmin. It's much easier to get to. Notice my my URL link up here, localhost phpMyAdmin. Okay, so everything goes through localhost. Okay, so right now I've got 1, 2, 3. I've got some basic pre-installed databases here, and these are the tables over on the left side. These are the table attributes and so forth. Now what I want to do is I'm going to go back to home here, is I'm going to import that database that I had, the SQL database. Now you can import SQL files. So when I go to my desktop, oh, I am on my desktop. It's being very hard to respond to. There is my SQL file. So I click that, select it, open it, and I now have that in that field. And I basically just keep all the rest of these settings by default, and I click go. And import has been done, and the database name is called Newland Tours. So I click that, and you'll see I have table agents, table country, table journal, table region, tours, users, and so forth. If I go into each one of these tables, for instance, and click them, you can see what fields there are, and agent ID, user, specialty. So this table has 3 fields. Now, we can add to this, we can subtract from it, but we're going to do all that through PHP, not through the database. But sometimes you actually have to come to the database itself to do all these updates. But for this point, right now, this is a much easier way to read this database than what we saw before. So you can even read some of the table fields and what's already been entered. Okay. All right, that's all I need to do with phpMyAdmin. So I can close this window. Now the next step is to go ahead and connect to the database in Dreamweaver. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and expand this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Windows folder here, or my window menu here. I'm going to go down to, let's see, we have a whole area of database, bindings, server, behaviors, components. I'm going to go to databases. Now what this is this is going to connect to your database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click plus, and then there's MySQL connection. All right. Now here, connection name, I'm going to type in CNN underscore Newland. So this tells me that this is a connection to Newland. MySQL Server, now this is always the point of contention. In this particular case, I'm using localhost. So in MySQL Server is going to be localhost. Username, now in phpMyAdmin, and I didn't show this, and normally you will do this on your own hosting service because you definitely want your databases to be secure. But in this case, I'm going to use default. And default is root. And this is what you would use if you did not do a user password. And I believe the root name, the password is also root. And then the database, if I click the select button, yeah, that's what I was afraid of. Okay, So difference between Mac is in Mac you do have to use username and password root. And in Windows, apparently there was no password, so I'm going to just leave that area blank. Again, you would want to create a username password. And when we get into WordPress and installing on remote servers, we will be doing that. But for now, we're just going to leave that by default. If I click select, you will then see all the databases that were in PHPMyAdmin, including Newland Tours, which was the SQL file that I just uploaded. So I click OK, and then I can test it. And then I click OK. Now, once I clicked OK, there are my tables. There are all my tables. I have now created a connection to my database here. And if you notice, down in the files here, if I open up connections here, you'll see that I have a file called cnn_newland.php, and these are my connection values. When we get into WordPress and when we get into installing WordPress, you're going to find that this is a familiar thing, because there is a wp_configure file that is going to be using these same values. And so this is something that we're going to see familiar. The cool thing about this is that when you have a website, in what Dreamweaver does is when it creates this file, is it automatically connects every single file in your website to your database just by this file alone. This is called connections. If I look now under test PHP, for instance, I'm not going to see anything here. But because of this configuration, a folder called connections and cnn_newland.php automatically connects every single file to your database. What does that mean? Well, for instance, if you had a login area, a database has to contain the information for the username and password, for instance. That information has to be saved somewhere, and the database would be the place you would save it. So let's say you had a page that could only be accessed in case you're logged in. So in that case, to go onto that page, there has to be a query that says, are you logged in? If you are logged in, what is your login and password? It has to parse the database to get that information. So therefore, that page has to be connected to the database. Anyway, we're going to continue on with this and what we can do with database connections. On the easiest level of understanding, it would be something like how to add into your database fields and subtract from your database fields. And a third one would be to show what the database is actually containing. We'll continue with that later.